Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the redneck. You bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to get you to do it too. And as a reminder, as we do every week on this program, when we talking about going green, we're not talking about mere environmentalism. We're talking about something deeper, the interconnectedness of all of life, deep ecology. And whether you come at that from a hard science, linear Western perspective, or you come at that from a more mystical or eco-feminist spiritual perspective, or like me, you say those are both perfectly valid ways to understand the world itself. I'm here to tell you that we are connected in this web of life, and whatever we do to that web, we ultimately do to ourselves. And y'all, we got to be honest. We doing it wrong. We're literally commodifying Mother Earth faster than she can replenish herself, all to create a bunch of useless crap for the most part, all so that corporations and the predatory class can just get more zeros in a bank account, right? And as if that's not bad enough, and we all know how terrible that is, we are also allowing this predatory class to create a fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive world order with the plunder. And with that cheery note, let's bring our good pal Shane Knight into the conversation. Howdy, Shane. How you doing?
I'm okay, my man. It's a holiday week.
Woo! Hey, look
Yeah.
here. I'm on a mission, Shane. Maybe not the Blues Brother mission from God, but it is a mission. I'm going to try. I hate the idea of Thanksgiving because we know the historical context, right? And
Yeah.
likewise, the thanks taking just feels so like ugly. So here's my pitch to you and everybody watching Redneck Gone Green. I'm going to wish everybody a happy harvest holiday because every group of human beings always celebrated the harvest season, right? On every continent, every group of humans. So for me, I wish you, Shane, and everybody watching or listening to Redneck Gone Green a happy harvest holiday.
I love that. Yeah, especially the concept of the harvest season. Because it's more than just one day. It gives me an excuse to eat turkey or just sit down and have good conversation with good people more than one day.
You know, I got to say, Shane, I don't know if you saw it, but Ruthie threw it up on the bottom that Southern comedies are my spirit animal. So I got to say, Matthew, wherever you from, brother, thank you for the kind words. That makes me, as my therapist has taught me to say, Shane, that makes me feel good.
Yes, that makes me feel good. Thank
And
you.
look at here, man. Like we got a great show. Before we jump in, I do want to say that apologies to Sharon Kyle, who is our guest. I saw that the opening intro was from last week with Anthony Rogers, right? It was a great show. If y'all didn't see it, go back and look at it. Anthony was a fantastic guest, but that was last week. This week we got Sharon Kyle coming up. But before we get to Sharon, Shane, that man, we usually just talk a little bit about what had happened in the week. And there's a bunch. And I got to say, I want to start off Epstein files. What the hell?
Mm, mm. Uh, Look, I have basically two takeaways from this whole, I don't know, soap opera side trail, I guess is one way to describe it. But what it's going to be muddled. I look at it like, okay, so he's now signed a bill to do something he didn't need a bill to do in the first place. They've been trying to cover this up since he got into office. Now you're going to have one version with redacted names and all the other things they're allowed to take out of it. And then other groups of people are going to have access to said files for whatever reasons. And then they're going to put their version out and say, well, that's not what we have. This is what we have. And then it's going to become a muddled mess. And the ultimate takeaway from it is going to be people are going to believe whatever they want to believe at the end of the day anyway. So all this hullabaloo is just more show from the showman himself. And then the second takeaway from it for me is what's with this pervasive perversion with people in positions of power? You know, I don't understand it at all.
You
But
know,
it seems to be so prevalent across the members of our elected officials. I am appalled constantly.
Thank you for that, Shane. I really appreciate both of those takes or takeaways. And I do want to underscore my agreement with you, and that is the horror of what those Epstein files represent begins with the undeniable truth that powerful men enabled, protected, and participated in a
Mhm.
system of exploitation and abuse. The documents that we've seen already illuminate not just one predator, but a network of predators who use wealth, power, influence, and institutions in order to perpetuate these crimes. It further shows an institutional failure that allowed that harm and abuse to persist for decades. So, to me, understanding the context is essential for demanding accountability and exposing how elites use secrecy to shield themselves from consequences. And this is something that we talk about on this program all the time. We've got to be willing to tell the truth.
Yep. Unabashedly, without fear.
And that also brings me to the second thing I wanted to make sure we talked about, and that was speaking of without fear. Love him or hate him, man. Zara and Mamdani's meeting with Donald Trump was really something to behold, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we know one person that really loved him.
Say it.
Judging by that photograph, I couldn't get, and then the right's going nuts. The maggots are like, "What?" But I do feel like basically everyone's response from Trump loving on Mamdani in the White House, I'm pretty sure everybody had that one moment where they were like, "What the fuck?" Because that's not Donald Trump's character. Like he's a one trick pony, and this time he went off the rails and didn't give us the pony we all expected, and everybody's freaking out about it. But I thought Mamdani really did a good job. I'm pretty sure he wasn't expecting Donald Trump to be what he was when he walked into the room either. But I feel proud of him, actually. 34 years old, newly elected mayor of the biggest city in the country. Well, most densely populated, I guess, and one of the most important in the world. But nevertheless, and all the same, look at that.
Yep, and let's be clear. New York City is the capital of finance. It is, in fact, I would argue, the most important city in the United States. I reckon Sharon may have something to say as a LA resident whenever we bring her on. But it's really a critical thing. And to me, what I thought with Mamdani was interesting was the posture that he took, right? He didn't back down, but he also didn't take the bait with Trump. And one of the things that I have personally sort of come to watch in Trump is, he is at his core a bully, right? And like he tried to intimidate and bully Mamdani. Mamdani wasn't having it, but also didn't fight back, just kept it cool, calculated on policy issues and affordability. And I think that what we saw was Trump then attempt to ingratiate himself to Mamdani.
Mhm.
It was a weird thing to watch. Now,
Yeah.
the most important thing, and I want to say this before we finish that, Mamdani's master class at that session was what it was. But to me, the real question is, we know for a fact over 100,000 people threw their hearts and souls and sweat equity and put their shoulder to the wheel doing canvassing and door
Mhm.
knocking and lit dropping and phone calling and so forth. So to me, I'm way more interested in what those 100,000 plus people do now. In other words, do they just become electoral fetishists and just keep, and I would say, learn the wrong lesson that elections are how movements get built? Or do they just, even worse, just say, hey, we won and go back to sleep? Or do they do what I hope they do, which is to stay engaged and active, to get involved in mutual aid efforts, to get involved
Mhm.
in community self-defense, to get involved in solidarity economy practices, principles, and policy work? And lastly, do they get involved in political education and study to understand this historic moment? If I were in New York City, that's what I would be desperately trying to do, is get involved with these folks and participate with them to take the movement deeper.
Well, I can tell you, I've seen bits and pieces of each one of those, just from people that I've talked to that are working with his campaign and or trying to. I can tell you for sure the latter is definitely a major focus of his transition campaign right now, just from the ads that he's been running on Instagram and throughout the city. I think it's hopeful. Now, whether or not people stay this active and energized, I think it largely depends on how well the transition goes and what New York City looks like on January the 1st, 2026.
You know, I do want to also end with the Trump's just horrific, obscene, disgusting, quiet piggy comment.
Oh,
I reckon everybody watching and or listening to us know what I'm talking about. But Donald Trump was asked a question about the Epstein files. A reporter followed up, a Bloomberg reporter, by the way, followed up, and Donald Trump literally said, "Quiet, piggy," to her. That wasn't a joke. It's a dangerous invitation to violence. It is misogyny of the worst order. It is absolutely in keeping with what a bully and horror show Donald Trump is. And it also, to me, Shane, shows the importance of us standing up to bullies like him.
yeah. And going back to your earlier point about one of the ways we do it is by making sure that the truth gets out there and putting the right people in place to make sure that happens.
Well, I got to say, Shane, this feels like a perfect opportunity to bring our guest into this conversation, because our guest is a fierce, independent journalist, a unabashed progressive journalist. Sharon Kyle is somebody who I've had the privilege of getting to know a bit in movement spaces. She's also, like me, a people's lawyer. She has been a director of the American Civil Liberties Union. She's been a People's Law School professor. And she, along with her husband, Dick Price, have co-created one of the most important progressive media outlets that I am aware of. It's called the LA Progressive. With that, I want to bring Sharon Kyle into this conversation. Howdy, Sharon.
Hi, David. How are you doing? Hi, Sharon.
I am mighty fine. Hi. It is such a pleasure to have you here. And again, as I do whenever I get the privilege of interviewing people who I know Sharon, and I consider Sharon a friend. So Sharon is somebody that, again, like I say, that I know, but I have her on because she plays a particularly important movement role.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be joining you guys and joining your audience. And democracy at work is really near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking a little bit in the next few minutes about how the LA Progressive was born and how the Left Coast Forum was born. And you also mentioned, I said the word born just now, and I said, I hope this gives him a hint about how I feel about New York. I was born in the Bronx. So, you know, once you're born there, you're always from there, even though I've spent pretty much my entire adult life in Los Angeles, but I was born and raised in New York City.
You know, I did not know that about you, Sharon. I do know this, though, that you and Dick have a long history of progressive politics. It didn't start with the LA Progressive, but that's how I got to know y'all when y'all were first doing a bunch of media work at Occidental College, and then the Left Coast Forum. But I do want to just take a bit about your personal path, including, you know, the racial and social justice, the public service. I want to give you, and in fact, entice you, Sharon, for our audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and why do you do the work that you do?
Thanks, David. And I want to apologize beforehand. If I get some kind of weird sound on my machine, which it's been coming up randomly, I'm going to turn off my mic for a second and you guys can just talk. Okay, thank you. So how did I get to where I am today? Because obviously I wasn't born with the knowledge that I have. I think that living in the body of a woman, of a Black woman in the United States, my parents both came from mixed cultural environments. I have one side of my family, my ancestors that were part of the Great Migration up from the South, from Virginia and North Carolina. And then another whole half of my ancestry came to the United States from the Caribbean. And there's something about the people who came from the Caribbean who had a strong sense of agency about their lives. And they actually were aspiring, coming to the United States, aspiring to accomplish some things that they thought would be more possible for them to accomplish than if they remained in the West Indies. So anyway, so I'm the oldest of 11 grandchildren on both sides of my family. I born and raised in New York, left New York, married early, was a teenage mom. And in fact, I didn't go to law school until my youngest child had already been practicing law for 4 years. I worked for NASA. I just stumbled upon a job working for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for 23 years. And it's partly what I attribute to educating me on many fronts, including what it's like to work with 10,000 people. For the most part, 95% of them are white. And it began to that experience of working with some very brilliant people who would consider themselves liberals, many not, but many would consider themselves liberals. It was working in that environment that my eyes began to open to how it is that we continue to live in a segregated society. You know, we had when I was born, segregation wasn't quite state sanctioned. It had been overruled by the United States Supreme Court in the mid 1950s, before I was born. But still, segregation was prevalent. And it really hasn't changed that much. So while we don't have state sanctioned segregation anymore, we have socially acceptable, socially sanctioned segregation. And it was what I witnessed as I worked in that environment with some of the most brilliant scientists, engineers, all attempting to achieve what had been humanly impossible to achieve until then. So I worked on the Mars Pathfinder mission, the Magellan mission, the Ulysses mission, Voyager mission, the Genesis mission, and each of these missions were conducted in a way that put the working team, the space flight team, sort of in a cocoon where they worked day and night together as a business unit to accomplish the things that we were able to accomplish. Uh-oh, there's that weird
There
thing
it
happening
is.
on my computer.
I hope nobody's stealing a car.
I don't know. I probably needed to reboot before I joined you. So you asked me, how did I get to this path? There were some things that happened in my life. Working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, working at NASA, working with brilliant people, but somehow observing how they were blind to their own blindness to racism. Also, the growth of the prison industrial complex. So I'm Black. Around 1971, when Lewis Powell wrote the Powell Memo, I was still pretty much a child. But I witnessed in my adult years a lot of the manifestations of what were written in that Powell Memo. I watched them play out in my life, in the Black community in the Bronx and Queens, where I was from. My parents, who were a generation before me, they didn't have tons of friends in prison. Yet every time I turned around, I was hearing about one of my friends being arrested and getting some unreasonable sentence for something that just seemed outlandish. And it really wasn't until Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, that the rest of the nation started to take a look at this. By the time that book came out, the United States had this huge mass incarceration problem because of the profiteering that goes on and a whole host of problems. But anyway, I had a very dear friend who did end up being convicted of a nonviolent drug-related felony. He was arrested in Washington, D.C., which meant that when he was convicted, he was going to be sent to a federal prison because Washington, D.C. is not a state and does not have state prisons. So he could be transferred all over the country, and he was. And he was convicted for a drug-related crime. His sentence, because he refused to cop a plea, was 23 years. And so I wrote to him for 20 years. I visited Leavenworth Federal Prison. These are all the things that are like blinders are coming off. Blinders are coming off. I visited Leavenworth Federal Prison, and that's when I said, "Oh, I see what's happened with slavery. This slavery has changed. We've changed the name of it, but we're still doing." And now that the wonderful documentary, The 13, which is the documentary by can't think of her name right now, but she talks about how the 13th Amendment makes it clear that the United States never actually abolished slavery. We still have people who are imprisoned all across the United States who are forced to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just giving you a taste of some of the things themes that have woven throughout my life that has led me to do the work that Dick and I do every day. We publish this digital magazine. We started it in 2008, and we have done it daily ever since.
So thank you so much, Sharon. That was a rich background and story. I loved how you made it both personal, but also the personal is political. Yeah. I also want to lift up the fact that you, with your law degree, were director of the American Civil Liberties Union, and you did a stint as a law professor of the People's College of Law. And in fact, I think you were even the CEO of the People's College of Law for a couple of years.
Yes, that's right. So let me tell you about the directorship of the ACLU. So the ACLU has not chapters, they have what they call affiliates in every single state of the United States. So every state has one ACLU office, except for California. California has 3. And I was on the board of the ACLU Southern California, which made me on the board of directors and a director of the ACLU of Southern California. I was elected by the body to be on the executive board for the ACLU National in New York. And I did that for about 12 years. And that was after I graduated from law school, but you don't have to have a law degree to be a member of the ACLU, to be active in the ACLU. And in fact, we highly recommend that everybody listening right now, go to the ACLU, aclu.org, and read some of the articles there. And if you can, donate, join. It's very inexpensive. But anyway, so I did that for 12 years. But I was telling you that my youngest child had gone to law school. She graduated. She was practicing law. And at this point, I was coming to the end of my time at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory because I was feeling an urging. I needed to exercise the feelings that I had within me in a different way. And so I decided, well, now the kids are gone, I can go to law school myself. And I did. So I went to People's College of Law, graduated, and immediately began teaching there. And so I taught for 7 years, and then another elected position, I was elected to be the president/CEO of People's College of Law. And that was a wonderful experience. I highly recommend that every American should at least have a cursory understanding of the law. You don't have to have a law degree, but we all—
wait a second, you're asking a bit much for my relatives.
Oh, there it goes.
I appreciate that's a good quip, Shane, but I appreciate Sharon saying this, because one thing that I know again, I can't represent clients no more because I don't pay I quit paying the bar dues, right? But it ain't like Sharon, I forgot everything I learned. And I was a quite successful trial lawyer for about a decade. But here is the thing, that the law is actually not it is complex in the sense that you've got to know what questions to ask. But if you like, anybody that has a reasonably inquisitive mind and is willing to put in the work can understand the principles of the law. But one thing that I got to tell folks is, looky here. And like Oliver Wendell Holmes is no great hero of mine, right? Like he's got like he was a jurist, a Supreme Court justice who was on the side of the wealthy and the powerful and always was. But he did say something that Sharon, I don't know if you remember this quote, but he once said, if you want justice, look to the courts of heaven. On the courts on earth are interested in consistency. And
That's
so,
absolutely right. It's important to know that.
and this is the point, like just because something is fair or righteous or just does not mean that it's legal or not, right? Like the legal system is consistent in the sense that it is supporting and defending the cultural narrative. And because we live in a racist, sexist, and class oppressive society, for the most part, the law and the legal doctrines support them. What's interesting, Sharon, is I'll just make this big argument, and that is there was a brief moment in time from the Brennan court for about 20 years where lawyers could, in fact, get a hell of a lot more justice out of that system. But remember, slavery was legal. The subjugation of women and queer folks was legal. I could go down the list of the things that were legally enforced, codified under both statutory law and justices and Supreme Court opinions that justified it. And it took mass people's movement to do something about it. So the point I'm making is, do not expect that the law is the last bastion of justice. Arthur Kanoy, the great law school professor at Rutgers University, I'll never forget, he used to say, remember this, we'll get exactly as much justice in the courts, no matter how good a trial you are, David, but you'll only get as much justice in a courtroom that is commiserate with how much hell the movement is raising in the streets. So to me, it is, yes, we need good lawyers and we've got to use the legal system, but we've also got to create independent progressive media. We've got to do mutual aid. We've got to build movements. And I got to say, Sharon, like one of the things that I love about you, every time I've engaged with you, the kind of relationship building, the kind of care and attention that you give to people and the organizations and the issues that they represent, I just really have deeply appreciated that you don't use your legal background and knowledge over people, but instead facilitate it. And I just wanted to lift up and really appreciate you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for that compliment. It's what I try to be. And in fact, you know, I never actually practiced law. I went to law school, entered at the age of 49. My intention was to educate myself about the law. And that's what I did. But I really wanted to be a better publisher for the LA Progressive. And so my background in law, my teaching, that was so mind expansive, because, you know, they say that whatever you really want to learn more about, try teaching it. And I'm telling you, I think that's it's great advice. But the reason that I say that every American should have at least a cursory knowledge of the law, I think that it would drop some misconceptions that we all have. Those of us that don't come from families with attorneys, which I certainly didn't. I grew up in the projects in the Bronx. Understanding some of the basic principles of the law, I came to the conclusion, most like what you just said, David, that the law and the way that it's structured does not produce justice. We have to produce justice. And sadly, we have a population that seems to have lost their sense of agency, if they ever had it.
You know, I really appreciate that. Oh, go ahead, Shane.
No, I totally agree with that. They don't understand, what a sense of agency is first. At least a lot of folks I know don't understand that concept. And then secondarily, they certainly don't know how to maintain one.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, please, you.
So I heard this story once let's talk about sense of agency. Dick and I had joined a Democratic club, like, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And we found that when we would have our meetings, and occasionally an elected official would drop in. So many of the members acted like this elected official was a celebrity. You know, give him the best seat. You know, Sharon, get up. Let's let Commissioner so and so sit down. What? Oh, there goes that thing again. It's going to stop on its own. I'll reboot, but not right now.
Dad, don't reboot now. You know, to me, I really appreciate, Shane, you sort of diving in on that part, because personal agency really is the engine of any real social movement, because the change has to begin with individuals who are choosing to act rather than wait for either others or some mystical something to happen. When people recognize their own power to influence systems, they can become active participants rather than passive observers. Here on Redneck Gone Green, that's one of the things that we're constantly trying to inspire people. The reason that we have our guests on is because these are folks who are exercising agency, and personal agency fuels creativity, innovation, movements to adapt strategies and build resilient networks. And frankly, it also is what inspires others. See, and you know, Sharon, I am a believer not in the great person theory of social change or history, but social movements. Social movements have always been the engine of driving any great change. Now, typically, people end up sort of for the narrative arc of it all and the storytelling of it all, and sometimes they are, in fact, inspirational. But at the end of the day, strong movements are composed of individuals who understand that their decisions, their actions matter in shaping the world that they want to live in.
I couldn't agree with you more, David. You know, I've been lately, since the second Trump administration, I've been doing a lot more writing in the LA Progressive and a lot more research. I'm deeply concerned about the direction that we're going in. And I even am concerned about my own personal well-being, the well-being of all the Black and brown people I know and love. But I'm wondering, is it possible for us, and what I mean by us, I'm talking humankind, is it possible for us to ever develop and practice true participatory democracy? And, you know, we've never had it in this country. And there was a time that I would say, you know, we've never had democracy. And immediately there would be people who would contradict me or challenge why I take that position. But Ken Burns has a new documentary out right now on PBS about the American Revolution. And there's stuff about Ken Burns that doesn't make me happy. But one of the parts of this documentary discusses how democracy was not something that the original founders intended for this country. They actually feared democracy. And you know, when you think about it and you look at how the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, none of those documents mention the word democracy, because they thought that democracy equated to mob rule. And the country was built on a foundation of having a small, elite, wealthy, white male group make decisions for everybody else, and basically live off land that was stolen and labor that was stolen to provide to them for their benefit.
So I love that you are truth telling, as we would expect from a progressive journalist. And I will 100% agree that we've never experienced genuine participatory democracy on this continent as the USA. But I do want to point out that indigenous governance systems, including here on Turtle Island, did in fact have participatory democracy across not only the Americas, but Africa and Oceania, practiced forms of consensus seeking decision making, where councils and elders and community members collectively deliberated and approved decisions, emphasizing participation over hierarchy. I'll also remind us all that medieval Iceland had assemblies to make laws and resolve disputes. Ancient Athens used citizens, although they did exclude women and enslaved people and non-citizens, but citizens were allowed to participate directly in the assembly using sortition, which is choosing by lot who was the administrator. And then I want to point out the Paris Commune of 1871, where for a very brief period, working class Parisians experimented with a system of direct representation, recallable delegates, and collective decision making. And then there's been just a host of modern examples and experiments in participatory democracy. And the science shows that people are more empowered and more fulfilled when they get to participate in helping to shape decisions. And remember, it doesn't mean that everybody wins. It just means everybody's voices genuinely gets to be heard. And that's something that we do not have in this Disney version of petty bourgeoisie democracy, where you just go and vote every 2 to 4 years. Participatory processes inspire and empower people. And that's what I love about LA Progressive, the constant encouragement and refrain of participatory democratic systems.
Well, thanks, David. Thank you for the list of all of those cultures that have had some form of participatory democracy, because I want to do more research on them and see, what was life like in those societies. We here in the United States, for the past few hundred years, we keep calling this thing democracy, and it just puzzles me. When the United States, the 13 colonies, after the 13 colonies came together and formed the United States, I guess that's in 1781, after the revolution. I don't even want to call it a revolution. It was actually what they call the War of Independence, because there was nothing revolutionary about it. They basically took the same structure that existed, where white, male, property owners, wealthy, that same class of people just switched from the British to the Americans. So there really was no real revolution, no radical change.
So yes, and right, because everything that you've said is true. And I don't want to throw this baby out with the bathwater, because let's acknowledge that the Declaration of Independence and the War for Independence did do one very important thing, which was to undermine the idea of the divine right of kings. And that's a big deal.
Okay, hold it, because I'm just actually in the middle of writing an article about Marjorie Kelly's book. Mm-hmm. Marjorie Kelly wrote a fabulous book, and the name of the book is The Divine Rights of Capital. Mm-hmm. So there was the divine right of the kings, and there was a time, a few hundred years in Europe, where the monarchy was considered to have those seats, those high seats above everyone else, because God granted it to them. And of course, in time that changed, but it didn't change completely. What we've done now, we've taken corporations and the wealthy, and we've given them divine rights. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me how people have accepted and voted for Donald Trump a second time. It's just a second time. This is a clear indication that we do believe in the divine right of capital, that there should be two separate sets of rules and laws, that certain people should be shielded from the consequences of their decisions, that it's just fine. I mean, it's okay for them to rape children. It's okay for them to, I think he's become a few $1 billion richer as a result.
Oh, yeah. They're all stealing from us.
Yeah. Violating the Constitution. There it is again.
It was good timing, though.
Yeah.
So what I'm just saying to you is, although we might think that we no longer have these divine rights of the monarchy or divine rights of the king, we still do.
Well, I agree. And it's not, granted, David is also right, but at the same time, what the American culture grew into out of all of that was an adulation of people they could put on a pedestal, because they still want to be on the pedestal. the idea of collective communal living really was squashed at every turn. Every time it started to rise up in this country, the people on the pedestal and the people over here cheering them on have all said, no, 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 we don't want to live like this. We want our dude on the fucking pedestal. And then the media that this country churns out ad nauseum is all celebrating the same thing.
So, thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate that very important point and intervention. I also want to lift up a longtime viewer, listener here on Redneck Gone Green, Michael Nugent, who points out, it seems when you scale up, the shape that direct democracy gets more complex. And I think that's absolutely accurate, Michael. And I want to point out that if we took it seriously, that is, that we really did want to have a functioning democratic republic, that we wanted to empower people and give equal protection under law to human beings, not corporations. If we actually wanted to do that, that complexity could actually be solved through a combination of political education, engagement, participatory processes. Like, there is cutting edge neuroscience, there's cutting edge political science, there's cutting edge things like proportional representation and sortition and people's assemblies. There are all sorts of ways where that complexity can be met, but if and only if we're going to actually prioritize the idea of an ecologically sustainable, racially and social just political economy and society. And right now, y'all, capitalism and white supremacy and heteropatriarchy and settler colonialism are all power over dominator systems, and the cultural phenomenon behind all of them are ultimately about empire and capitalism. And that's the reason I do want to have this conversation with you, Sharon, and that is, in this moment, especially in California, like, what do you see as the best hopes? Where are you seeing examples where folks are trying to grapple with creating our own institutions based on racial and social justice, based on ecologically sustainable practices? Because I'll be honest, I'm not seeing it in the Democratic Party. I'm not seeing it in electoral politics. I'm seeing ordinary people trying to create those things. And I'm wondering what you're seeing.
I agree with you. I'm also not seeing it in electoral politics, but I am encouraged by the small groups that I see just pop up locally. There are all kinds of opportunities for resistance. We just had an event yesterday. Today is Monday. So Saturday, all day, there was a festival just around the corner from me where artists and activists and academics spent the day sharing their knowledge. Sort of like the vibe was very much like Occupy. Remember the Occupy movement. So throughout history, we have had fits and starts of very local groups coming together, attempting to resist. But what we have lacked, and we continue to lack, is the kind of structure that is needed where this energy can flow into and drive a democratic force to scale. We have not done that. I am happy to say that the one silver lining for me with Donald Trump doing things like calling the woman a piggy, he's just getting more and more people more engaged and more involved.
You know, that's such an important observation that you make. And a couple of things I want to lift up. First, Sharon, you in your last comments and throughout this entire conversation have talked about the importance of art and culture. And to me, it's important to remember that art, culture, and narrative shapes the way people see the world and gives social movements the language to express itself, both grievances, but also to imagine and envision the alternatives. Narrative can inspire empathy, connection between individuals, and to experiences that go beyond our own personal ones and build solidarity across communities. So stories performance art can challenge the dominant narrative and make sometimes abstract issues much more tangible and urgent. And again, this is the reason why, to me, the power of storytelling is so important. And it's not enough. We've got to have institutions, people's institutions, that can take those narratives, those stories, and those experiences and shape it in ways that meet people's objective material needs and engages in electoral politics. But here's the point I want to make, Sharon. I think that the problem, the mistake that so many people make is a binary one where they say either, oh, elections are where you elect people who make decisions. That's where all the power is. And they focus all their attention on electoral politics. And they say, oh, that movement stuff, whatever. But elections are where it's at. Or they'll say, oh, man, if elections could change anything, they'd make it illegal, right? Movements are the only thing that's ever actually changed society. Elections are for chumps. Movements are where it's at. And Sharon, they're both right, which means they're both wrong. This either we do elections or we do participatory mass movements is it's a fool's challenge. It's a binary that I do not accept. We can build participatory movements and engage in electoral politics, but we cannot become electoral fetishists. We cannot believe that elections are the end all and be all. And that's, again, one of the things about the LA Progressive. And folks, you hear me talking about it, so I hope you'll join me. I'm a subscriber of LA Progressive. You can sign up for it for free. I'm going to ask you to drop that into the chat, Sharon, so that we can share it with folks, right? But at the end of the day, the LA Progressive is a place where racial and social justice and elections and movement work are talked about on an equal footing. And that's the reason that I really appreciate the work that you and Dick are doing at LA Progressive.
Right, because we agree with you, David. You know, I remember when George W. Bush ran, I think for the first time, I think it was 2004. And I had a very close girlfriend who was a staunch Democrat, and she couldn't conceive of the idea of the people in Florida voting for the Green Party candidate who was
well, 2004 was David Cobb.
Yeah, we're talking to him.
Was it you, David? Was it you? Okay.
It was 2000 was Ralph Nader, and Florida was the big deal. But
That's
2004, right. I mean, now I'm blushing a little bit, but I was the Green Party nominee in 2004.
Thank you, David, and thank you for being that. So she was really upset with people who voted for Green Party because she felt that it was siphoning off votes and that it would ultimately lead to George W. Bush's victory. I disagreed with her because I do see the Democratic Party being really a partner, just the other side of the coin of the Republican Party, and they both accomplish the same things, which is doing the work for the corporatocracy or the oligarchy. But I do think that there is a difference between the parties. And for me, that difference really, it came home to me after 9/11 and the way that George W. Bush handled the 9/11 crisis and the wars that we were thrown into for decades to come. And I wonder, would it have been different if Gore was elected? Would it have been different for the mothers of those sons who never came home? We'll never know. I think that it is essential that we do both and that we really understand that we're never going to have the kind of country that the vast majority of people in the United States want. We're not ever going to have it simply by going to vote either Democratic or Republican. It's not ever going to happen.
So thank you for that. And again, like, I am a registered Green Party member, and I'm proud of it. But I also spend most of my social change effort is in building alternatives, solidarity economy work, public banking, participatory budget, worker cooperatives, locally owned municipal energy production and distribution models. I also, do a lot of mutual aid work. I mean, at the end of the day, y'all, I believe that we should engage in electoral politics, but we should do it intelligently and strategically. And people can have disagreements, but I'll tell you this, Sharon, I strive never to turn somebody who agrees with me on principles and values, but has a different strategy and has decided to vote differently than me, to turn that person into my enemy.
Absolutely.
I think that, and I see it in the comments here on Redneck Gone Green. People fuss at each other about who they're deciding to vote for, and purity tests versus principles versus values versus whatever. And at the end of the day, I'm more than happy to have raucous, good debate and dialogue and discourse with folks. I rather enjoy it, right? But at the end of the day, I have no illusion that we're going to vote our way into the world that I want to live in. I do know this, that we are going to have to engage electoral politics authentically and seriously. And to me, the reason that it is so important is to recognize that, as Sharon just described, the Democratic and Republican parties are both in basic agreement on the superstructure, the political economy known as capitalism. They are in agreement about a world based on empire, extraction, domination, power over. I am interested in creating the participatory processes that inspire and empower ordinary people to meet their objective material needs. I am interested in something that what political scientists would call dual power, where we can engage in the existing system, but also create our own systems. And Sharon, what's exciting to me is when I look through the LA Progressive, we see that those things are bubbling up all around us. The corporate media never talks about it, but progressive media like, frankly, Redneck Gone Green, like LA Progressive, like the Democracy at Work YouTube channel, you'll hear about those things, but you'll never hear it in corporate media. Never.
That's right. And I want to thank Rick Wolf. Dick's my husband. We visited, I know what it is. Rick Wolf had come to California to give a talk, and we were invited. We attended, and I was blown away, as most people are the first time that they hear him, and the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, and the fifth time. So I was blown away, and I said to him, I want more of this. And it happened to be that he was visiting California just before the Left Forum in New York was going to be held. So he told us that we should come to California, come to New York. So we went to New York, we went to the Left Forum, and again, I was blown away. He and Chris Hedges and Cornel West had a wonderful plenary session. And I asked Rick, how can we have something like this in Los Angeles? He said, why don't you create it? And that was the birth of the Left Coast Forum. It was Rick Wolf, and then he provided us with support, with guidance. He was our first keynote speaker. And he was just, and he has become a friend. In fact, our most recent Left Coast Forum, he couldn't make it personally, but he made a videotape for the Left Coast Forum audience in Los Angeles. And we had that Left Coast Forum, I think it was October the 25th. It was very successful. We had to step back during COVID, and it took us a little while to get back on our feet. My husband had cancer. He's cancer-free now. But we're back on our feet, and we're back going strong with the Left Coast Forum and the LA Progressive. And it's really encouraging to me. As much as I can't stand seeing what's happening at the federal level, I love what's happening with the people, with the boots on the ground. People are understanding that we cannot just sit by and let this happen. Harm will come to us.
No, there's no doubt about it. And I'm so glad that, because I'm just now looking at the time, this conversation has flown by, but I do want to talk about the Left Coast Forum. Y'all had that at LA Trade Tech again, same place it was the first time. But this time, Sharon, do I got this right? You had over 500 people show up.
Well, we had over 900 people RSVP. So I don't know how many of the 900 showed up. I know at any given time, there were 500 people there. The Left Coast Forum this time was a one-day event, and it was, I think, 7 hours. So people came and went.
Came and went. So
right.
500 through the course of the day. So probably more than 500
That's right.
actually showed up.
That's right.
And 900 actually RSVP'd. So I hope y'all are going to do it again.
We are. We absolutely intend to do it again. And what was extremely invigorating was we had a discussion. I was the moderator. It's a discussion that I had been really wanting to talk about really since I'd become an activist, and that's racism on the left. We tend to look at racism, we look at the KKK, we look at, the white Christian nationalists that just, I don't care what Trump does, they want to just bow at his feet and kiss his ring. But we have problems on the left. And I feel those problems when I go to events, when my alarm goes off. I feel those problems when I go to an event on the west side of LA and I'm the only person of color at the event. Then when I drive back across town and go to an event on the east side of LA and I'm the only Black woman, we live such separated lives that what happened when George Floyd was murdered and the entire world came out, it surprised Black people because we know that what happened with George Floyd is nothing new. But for many people who are not Black, because of COVID and because of cell phone, this horrid scene went viral and people were outraged, as they should have been. But we can't see the difficulties that are still associated with being Black and brown in this country because we live such separate lives. And we can't see it when it's in our own backyards. And so this discussion I had, racism on the left, it was standing room only. And what was so encouraging about it was a mixed race crowd, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and we all talked. It was civil, and people said, we need more of this. So that's why we're going to be doing the Left Coast Forum again.
I am so glad that you are. And I'll tell you this, Sharon, one thing I know is that one thing that scares the bejesus out of the predatory class, and with people who look and sound like me and Shane start to talk with people who look and sound like you and finding that kind of common ground, like that's the only way we're going to win. And I really want to underscore that for me, a racially just, ecologically sustainable world is not only desirable, but it's not only fair, but it's also the only way we're going to get it is if we actually find ways to come together across difference. Now, again, I do think that the predatory class I am in a struggle with them. But what I challenge folks to understand is like the pigment differences that like culturally you have had a different lived experience because your body inhabits the pigment that it does. And this is a racist society. You present as a woman, I present as a man, so I've got male privilege. Privileges exist, but make no mistake about it. It is not my maleness or my whiteness that makes me a member of the predatory class, because here's the kicker. I'm not a member of the predatory class because capitalism cuts across that. And Oprah Winfrey is in a far more powerful position than I am, even as my whiteness and my maleness gives me privileges. And those are the conversations that we've got to have in order to build a movement that can win.
That's right. That's right. You're absolutely right. So
well, listen, we are coming to the end, Sharon. So I want to give you a chance for any final concluding remarks. How can people stay in touch with you and Dick and your work at LA Progressive, et cetera?
Okay, so we're on every social media platform you can think of. It's at LA Progressive. And so if you just do a Google search, if you look at my link tree, you're going to see everything from TikTok to Blue Sky to just the whole list of them. And everything is at LA Progressive. You can contact us at Dick_and_Sharon at laprogressive.com. And we're daily. So if you go to laprogressive.com, you will see our content. The content changes every day.
That is fantastic. And again, I am so grateful, Sharon, for you coming on. So I want to extend my appreciation and gratitude to you, Sharon Kyle of LA Progressive. I want to thank Shane Knight, co-host of this program. I want to thank Ruthie Engelke, who runs the board and is behind the scenes making it all happen. Most importantly, I want to thank you, the viewer listener of Redneck Gone Green. This community is growing. We're getting larger, stronger, and better organized every day. And that's because people like you are participating. You're liking, commenting, and subscribing. I want to ask you to please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, share that Substack writing. I got 4,000 people and growing on my own Substack. I write a weekly essay every week. So please do. And everybody always asks you to like, comment, and subscribe because that's the only way to break out of the corporate media. I also want to remind you that we come at you every week, Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Next Monday, we'll be joined by John Jeter. John is a former journalist known for his sharp investigative reporting and nuanced storytelling across politics, across culture, and social movements. His work combines rigorous research with a deep commitment to elevating unheard voices and challenging official narratives. John is a two-time Pulitzer Prize finalist with more than 20 years of journalistic experience. He's a former Washington Post bureau chief. He's an award-winning foreign correspondent on 2 continents and a former radio and television producer for Chicago Public Media's This American Life. I hope you'll join me next Monday on Redneck Gone Green. In the meantime, keep on keeping on. Can't stop, won't stop. Peace, y'all.